Edward Burtynsky was born in 1955 in a small town called St. Catharines, just outside of Ontario, Canada. This is where he found his interest and passion for photography. At a young age, his father took up amateur photography and purchased a blackroom, multiple cameras, and instructional manuals on how to work the cameras and produce black and white prints. Not only did his father influence him with all the photography equipment, his father had a bigger impact on the subject of his work, but it was unintentional. His father's accidental influence has shaped and made his whole career. Here's a short clip on how his father influenced him.
But I want you just to go right back to the beginning. Tell me about your father and I guess his influence on what it is you do now.
Well, I grew up in St. Catharines, which was a GM town. It was pretty much a one-company town. At that time, there was 11,000 workers that were working at GM in 100,000 towns, so it was like 1 out of 10. And they used to open up the factory to open houses. And when I was 7, I was able to see the making of block engines, like the metal pouring down chutes into the blocks. I was able to see big forge plants, these guys in silver, and I was really impressed by what was on the other side of that wall. And I used to go by that wall when I was a kid, and my father worked there, but I never knew what it was. And then all of a sudden this crazy world opened up. And I don't think it ever left me. It was always like this impression that we don't know that world. We drive in a car, but we don't know the place that made that car. We don't know the place that the stuff that comes from for our home. So we're totally disconnected. And if you think like 200 years ago, that's not the case. Your home was at all the materials that were within, a cart drive away.
Sure,
And so I think that started to form the idea that there was a subject here that somehow had a lot of meaning to who we are in today's society.
In order to pursue his dreams, he started by receiving a BAA in Photography and Media Studies from Ryerson University in 1982. He then opened his own business shortly after in 1985. The business was named Toronto ImageWorks, which was a darkroom rental facility, custom photo laboratory, and a new media computer training center. Toronto ImageWorks was fit for everybody in Toronto's art community. While running his business, he continued to work on his personal series. Here's a clip of how Burtynsky shot some of the photos that we will be observing.
My name is Edward Burtynsky, and this is how I've made this photograph. When I was in China, I had gone to this location where I wanted to show aqua farming in China, and I felt it was necessary to get that into the water film and into my water book project. So to make this image, it took 3 people. The first person, the key person, was the helicopter operator. And of course, the fate of the whole rig, which was over $200,000 between the helicopter and my camera, was in his hands. So he needed to be very steady with what he was doing. So the helicopter operator, and then there's an operator who just operates the head. And I can say, okay, move it a bit to the left, move it right, move it down, straighten out the horizon. And then I control the shutter release. So then when I like the shot and I like the composition, I would then push the button, and then I can see that the camera was actually shooting because it would make a flicker, because we were actually showing what the viewfinder of the Hasselblad was seeing. So we had a little video camera in the eyepiece projecting and sending the image, the video image, back to the small monitor with which I was composing. The helicopter had about a 10-minute period of time it can be in the air, and then you have to bring it back. So 10 minutes was the full length of the flight, so you have to get up in the air, get to the location, hover for the shot, come back, and have enough time to land it safely.
Burtynsky's first series that he shot was called Breaking Ground, which was shot from 1983 to 85. It was a series that showed photos of mines, rail cuts, and homesteads all across Canada and the US. Here is one of the most famous images from the series called Rail Cuts No. 1. Shortly after, he continued on a series from 1991 to 1992 called Vermont Quarries. This was shot in Vermont, USA. The series had been said to have really launched his career. This is one image from the amazing series called Rock of Ages No. 7. Burtynsky was said to have made about half a dozen trips to Vermont to photograph some of the deepest quarries in the United States and throughout the world. Shortly after, in 1993, he continued to explore his fascination of quarries in the historic Marble Mountain region of Carrara, Italy. Burtynsky was faced with the issue of limited access to his first choice of quarries and was redirected to one of the 100 active quarries in the area, which actually proved to be a flawless white marble mountain, perfect for depicting the enormity of the process. In 1995, Burtynsky began his series called Tailings in Ontario, Canada. This is where he shows landscapes affected by the oxidation of iron that is left behind in the process of separating nickel and other metals from ore. He employs the use of high-contrast bright oranges against muted earth tones to create a compelling photograph. He then went on to shoot the series Urban Mines from 1997 to 1999. On this series, Burtynsky says, "Current society is searching for a way to come to terms with taking from the earth. Recycling is one way we can put a stop to a certain amount of damage to the earth. This material comes from the collects around urban centers and large recycling yards. These yards are like secondary mines." Oil was a project Burtynsky worked on for a span of 11 years, from 1999 to 2010. As his career progressed, he started thinking about oil, or in his words, how is oil a source of energy that makes everything possible, while simultaneously a source of dread for its ongoing endangerment of our habitat. This thought was the basis for the oil series, which clearly depicts our complicated relationship that we have with industrialism. His series Shipbreaking was shot in Bangladesh in 2000 to 2001, but we will come back to this series in just a second and go into further depth. In 2004 to 2006, he worked on a series called China. This series was trying to show humanity's disregard for the environment when it comes to mass consumerism. And lastly, his series Water, shot from 2009 to 2013. He travels all around the world, making stops in Canada, USA, Mexico, Europe, Asia, Iceland, and India. Burtynsky says this about the series. While trying to accommodate the growing needs of an expanding and very thirsty civilization, we are reshaping the earth in colossal ways. In this new and powerful role over the planet, we are also capable of engineering our own demise. We have to learn to think more long-term about the consequences of what we are doing while we are doing it. My hope is that these pictures will stimulate a process of thinking about something essential to our survival, something we often take for granted: water. Now back to the series Shipbreaking. We really wanted to dig in a little deeper to this photo series because of the striking similarities it has to 19th century photographer Francis Frith. Both Burtynsky and Frith are trying to say something about people through their photographs of landscapes in which people have created. While Frith believed these cultures he shot were struggling because of lack of religion, Burtynsky believes these places are struggling because of their industrialism. Both photographers position their photographs as faithful representations, which could lead into the discussion of ethics in documentary photography and photography's presumed realism. They both use people and familiar objects in their photographs to show the viewer the actual scale of the figures that you are looking at. For example, in Burtynsky's image displayed, he is using the human figures to show the viewer how large these objects actually are in proportion to the viewer. Now looking at Frith's image displayed, he is trying to do the same thing, letting the viewer become aware of the massive size of these objects. Here are a couple more examples on how the two photographers are similar. Having traveled the world in a quest for human-altered and industrial landscapes, Burtynsky's photographs show us the cycle of our consumption. The extremely large size of his photo prints show us the desire for viewers to have a bodily and visual engagement with his work. He really focuses on the parallel between our desire and our demand for material comfort and our knowledge that overconsumption and overpopulation is hugely destructive to our natural world. His photos show us landscapes that we urban dwellers rarely ever see, but also include such a great degree of detail that are hyper-rich, hyper-rural, and ultimately hyper-disturbing. Looking at his photos, eventually your admiration turns towards terror, as you realize that humanity, which is yourself included, has astonishingly destructive power. Burtynsky's photos show us that we can level mountains, excavate craters the size of canyons, and create massive lakes filled with toxic waste. Suddenly the natural world seems small and vulnerable, and mankind assumes the role of a violent and unappeasable God.